Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lisa Mitrakin, and today I will show you how to color this beautiful graveyard fairy on extremely dark paper. And when I say extremely, obviously it's not black, but it is considerably darker than what I usually work with. The page that I'm demonstrating this effect on today is one of my two graveyard fairies that are part of a set. I'm going to put the link to where you can get this set in the video description, and it's probably popping up on the screen. And the paper that I printed it on is this dark coffee brown Recollections cardstock paper. To give you a comparison of what I usually use and call it dark toned paper is this. This is something we did a couple of weeks ago and it looked so dark. Coloring with pencils and markers and of course white charcoal, this is as dark as I would recommend going. Let's dive right in. On this one, because we're working on paper that is so heavily tinted, I suggest starting with brush markers. Now for this type of tutorial, the shorter version of the coloring, this is only about 20-25 minutes long. The actual project took over 3 hours to complete. But for the short and sweet version, I am not going to call out every single color and every single name of my markers and my pencils. I will talk about the mood and the feel and the darkness and the saturation, of course, of every given pigment that I'm using. Also, if you've been following this channel or if you're a member of my academy, if you've been with me for any length of time, you know that I am not big on brand names at all. I am working with Copic markers on this one. I'm not going to tell you to go out and buy Copic markers, especially that they're literally the most expensive marker out there. So you definitely don't need to go out and buy this $300 marker set. You can work with any brush markers at all, or actually with any markers at all. There are lots of very affordable marker options out there. You can even get really cheap $1 or $2 sets at your local stationery store. It really doesn't matter. This paper is very friendly. The only reason that I suggest brush markers is because of the aesthetics of the actual brush strokes that we're getting here. Notice how the color settles into the page. This is relatively heavy paper, 65-pound or 80-pound cardstock. Either one of them will work, and both 65 and 85-pound cardstock are friendly for any kind of basic household printer. So none of you will have problems actually printing on this. But it's heavy enough for us to use markers without any kind of bleed through or paper surface damage. So that's another reason why I love cardstock so much. And the reason that I love brush markers so much is what you're seeing on the screen right now. The combination of cardstock paper and the brush marker painting technique creates this sort of a watercolor effect. As soon as I apply the strokes to the page, you see that the page kind of absorbs it and absorbs it not perfectly evenly. That's exactly what we want. We want these pools of colors. And working with something that has a brush tip on it, as opposed to a regular marker tip or a highlighter tip, allows us to create this kind of a Japanese brush stroke effect, which is especially perfect for this graveyard fairy background because she's in the forested area. We have lots of leaves. It's fall, it's Halloween time. We have all of these beautiful falling leaves in the background, and of course, some kind of tree branches hanging off on the sides as well. Another thing that I like to do is to actually outline my character with markers. Brush markers make it much easier than any other kind of marker, unless you're going with like a super fine tip felt pen, like the sort of thing that I use for Inktober. That's also an option. If you have a collection of different markers and you have something that's a thin fine liner, you can use that for your outlines. But I actually like the brush stroke look much better because there is thickness variation here. There's line thickness variation that naturally happens as we follow the outline of this character. As far as the darkness of the markers that I'm selecting, I'm going with things that are noticeably darker than the color of my paper. Anything that's lighter than the color of my paper will simply look invisible. But because we're starting bold, we're starting with markers on a coloring page, that's always really scary. Because we took this leap of faith, I would recommend starting with the lightest markers that you have and just see how they apply to the paper, see the effect that's happening, and then slowly build up that courage and start using colors that are a little bit bolder. So now I've had the feel for what my paper can take and what my paper can actually depict and the color that it can actually hold. And I can move up to a brighter orange color, which looks still very pale simply because the paper is so dark. So why are we working on dark paper to begin with? It seems so risky, it seems so different and terrifying. Why even do this at all? Well, because of the actual effect that we're going for. I ran a poll in our community a few weeks ago showing you the 2 graveyard fairies and asking you which one you would like me to color on the show. And most of you voted for this one, specifically asking me to cover the dichotomy of the delicate fairy creature versus the macabre graveyard background. You wanted to see how I will handle that delicate versus creepy. So for the delicate versus creepy look, we definitely want a base dark background, hence very dark paper. So since we're already doing that, I'm going to show you all the cool things that this paper offers. And what's happening on the screen right now is I'm adding lilac, this very mid-tone, very basic purple brush marker color that I picked. And this is going to be very common to any marker set, so don't worry about picking exact names and matching exact colors. But once again, you can see how vivid the color is on the actual cap of this marker versus the color that we're getting on the page. It's barely there. Like, this is like tea leaf coloring. It's dainty, it's gorgeous, but it's barely there by comparison. And by now the image has been on the screen for long enough for our eyes to adjust to it. It simply looks like a regular old page. It doesn't look that extreme anymore because we're not seeing it in contrast with white. So as your eyes are getting used to it, you will also get bolder and braver and will up the saturation of your colors. Moving on to my absolute favorite tool in the world for coloring and drawing, white charcoal. Comes in a stick form, and this is how you sharpen it. I prefer it in a stick form, but for the purposes of this coloring, the pencil form will work as well. And since I know many of you will ask me about the brand, even though I'm not brand oriented, I do prefer the General's brand white charcoal. That's the one that I've been using for years, and I'm just kind of stuck on it. What we're doing with this white charcoal is we're using it as a primer for everything that's her skin and her hair. And this is a dramatic effect right away. Look at that. That's a little scary. That properly looks like white chalk on a school board. But worry not, it's not going to be this extremely white in the end. Once you've applied enough of this stuff in little circular motions on her face and on her hair, we're going to do her back as well, everything that's her skin and her hair. Once you've applied enough of this effect, grab a Q-tip and very gently, once again, in little circular motions, start blending it. And this way we're creating this absolutely stunning kind of a marble statue effect. The cool thing about white charcoal is that it works really well over any kind of toned paper, and it's particularly stunning on this very dark cardstock. Again, very dark for coloring. The main reason that I say don't go darker than this for coloring isn't because you can't apply the right pigments to it. It's because you won't be able to see the line work printed on it. But if you're freehand drawing these images, then it doesn't matter. You can draw on actual black paper, and many of my students do. Now that we have our character's skin and hair primed, let's do some delicate shading with our colored pencils. This is where the detail work comes in, and this is what many of us are used to for our traditional coloring techniques. everything leading up to this has just been setting the stage. We needed the right degree of darkness for the background. We needed to set our light primer so that we know which areas are highlighted the most. And that is it. The other thing that we said is a general color mood. Obviously, this is going to be very heavy on orange tones because it's Halloween and because it's fall, and that's the scene that we're depicting. And that was actually what drove the decision to use this kind of cardboard brown paper to begin with. If my main color was teal, for instance, I would go with something more on the blue or green side. If my main colors were darker browns or darker blues, I may have gone with mid-tone gray. And the colors that I'm choosing for my pencils are also very specific and delicate. That first color that I've been using is actually clay rose. It appears a little bit purplish, but at this point, we want nuance. We don't want screaming bright colors, so no actual purple on her face at this point. Later on in the coloring, there will be plenty of time to make insane decisions, but right now we're working delicately. So pick a color, once again, not sticking to brands at all. I believe that anyone can color with the tools that they have in the house, even if it's a simple color pencil set from the 99-cent store. Look at what's appearing on the screen. Look at the mood. Understand the mood that we're going for and try to match that with the tools that you have. However, if you would like to see the full recording of this coloring and many other colorings that I've done in the past, all of that is up for my patrons of the Coloring Club tier. This particular coloring will be up for the entire month of November for my Coloring Club members. And the way that it works is they get the full uninterrupted real-time speed recording with every single tool and every single color called out on the screen. I don't lecture through those recordings. I simply offer the entire process. And for many people, that's an extremely useful tool in addition to this tutorial. In this tutorial, I teach you the technique and I point out the most important things to keep in mind, while in the full recording, you just have the 3-hour process and you can pause and play and follow along and actually recreate the same exact effect using the same exact colors. The colors that I've used so far on the face are clay rose for my very dainty purple. And this is from the Prismacolor set, this entire thing, everything that I'm using for pencils are Prismacolors. My second color that looked kind of light cream was ginger root. The dark brown that I used for the outlines is sienna brown. Then I've added some yellow ochre to add just a touch of brightness, a touch of that glow to the skin and also to the background. And now I'm adding poppy red to both the circles around the eyes, the lips, and the little accent color on the decorations in her hair. So that's just to give you an idea of the kinds of colors that I'm choosing for my delicate effect. Again, I'm not going to call out every single color for the rest of the show, but at least now you're starting to see the pattern of the types of colors that I'm adding. And notice that I'm constantly going back and forth between the face and the hair. And that's going to be a recurring theme for the rest of this coloring as well. As soon as I add an effect somewhere and I see that it's working, I may want to add an accent splash of that color, of that effect somewhere else. For instance, the poppy red is a really gorgeous infusion of this highly saturated and just pleasant color that made her lips and the circles around her eyes pop so very beautifully. So it just made sense to add an infusion of that color to a few strands of her hair as well. Those are on-the-spot decisions that just happen when you color. That part wasn't planned at all. Now let's bring our white charcoal back for those wings. I'm going to bring in the final version of this coloring on the left side of the screen so that you guys can compare, so that you can see what we're working towards. In the full recordings, I always have the final version on the left, so those of you who are Coloring Club members, you're familiar with this presentation format. Notice though, as we're adding pure white charcoal to the wings, this is the same exact process as we used on the face and the hair, yet observe how incredibly different the effect is. All of a sudden, the wings now appear pure white, while the face isn't white at all. She no longer looks like she's wearing some weird white face mask. Her skin tone is natural, in air quotes, for a creepy graveyard fairy from the Victorian era. You know, whatever natural is for that look. But you know what I mean. Her face looks believable. The shadows on her face are actually human. Yes, she has red circles around her eyes, but it goes with our whole Gothic Victorian style of this graveyard creature. And now comparing that to the pure white of the wings, it's completely different. So that gives you an idea of just how much versatility there is with this tool, how much pigment you can add over white charcoal, and how it doesn't lock you into anything at all. If we want to make these wings red in the end, we absolutely can. But I want them to stand out as the whitest white on this coloring page, so I will leave it at that. And now it's time for some intense color infusion. We've done a lot of delicate work. We've done a lot of pale work. By now, I've added more of my clay rose shading to the dress. Again, all of my coloring club students will see the full recording of that and can follow along. But for the purposes of this lesson, we'll just skip through parts and we'll speed through parts just to give you guys an idea of the process and of the steps involved in the process and the decision making, of course. Now that I have my pale colors, my delicate colors, I can come in with higher saturation of colors. So pick a nice, strong burgundy. Again, this can be from any colored pencil set. This can be by any brand at all. I'm sure that if you've done even the minimal amount of coloring in your lifetime already, you have enough pencils to choose from to pick a strong burgundy like this. It doesn't have to match mine exactly in color, but it does have to match it in intensity. For those of you who are interested in this type of decision making and understanding what value is, what contrast is, how to pick the right color, how to pick the right intensity, why intensity matters, why certain effects come across the way that they do, why I just added orange over burgundy and it created this entirely new color. All of these behind the scenes artistic secrets are what I teach in my How to Use Colored Pencils Like a Pro course. So if you're at all interested in coloring, I highly recommend that when you go to It's Easy to Draw Art Academy, that's the course that you start with. And these are the final days of October, so we still have our Halloween super sale running. When you get to the Academy and you pick the course that you want, remember to use this code when checking out. You may apply this code to any course or course payment plan, and you can apply it to as many courses as you wish. The greatest thing is that once you purchase a course, it's yours to keep forever, so there's no rush. Lots of people prefer to use these super sales to get all the courses that they want and then go through them at their own speed, at their own pace, and at their own comfort level. So don't miss out. October's almost over. This is the last chance. Our next big sale is going to be Christmas. Always add purple to the shadows. Always, you say? Yes, always. Even in realistic skin tone coloring, our shadows are always slightly or sometimes strongly tinted purple. And that's just a reflection of how our human eye perceives the world. So a touch of realism always requires a touch of cool tones in the shadows. Here in our Victorian Gothic style, purple is even more important than in basic realism. So here we really want to lay it on thick. For my purple here, I'm using Parma Violet, which is a stronger violet shade than what I used on the face for the clay rose. Notice also, I talk a lot about contrast in my courses and in my tutorials. Notice how every time we add a stronger pigment, our previous lighter pigments all of a sudden seem even more subdued. The face seemed so extremely purple when we started coloring it, and now it just looks kind of normal and natural and pale. Contrast is a huge part of coloring. And speaking of contrast, now that our dress is done, we can move on to the dark and creepy and macabre part of the coloring. This is what you guys asked for. You wanted to see me color the graveyard. You wanted to see how I make this creepy, dark, spooky place of death work with this beautiful, dainty, elegant creature. And the secret is high contrast. We want to go as dark on these gravestones as is humanly possible. So, contrary to how I usually work, I actually started shading the graveyard background with pure black and adding my colors over it. Because Prismacolor is so incredibly friendly to work with, it's no issue for me to add this Parma Violet actually over my black, which creates not just a beautiful creepy dark effect, but also kind of a haunting fog effect to truly enhance the horror style of this illustration, but still keeping everything very glamorous. You can decide how dark you want to go with your background. For me, I kept the darkness on the bottom part of our oval, so just the gravestones, and trailed it off into a lighter, more hopeful area on the top where we have the leaves and the sky. Don't neglect your framing though. We still have a lot of leaves left here on the edges, which we primed with our brush markers, and now we can easily go over them with colored pencils. I hope that by now you noticed a trend of purple and orange in this coloring. For those of you who have gone through my course, How to Use Colored Pencils Like a Pro, you guys know exactly why I chose that color combo. Color combos are an amazing, helpful tool for colorists, and it's important to learn them, to master them, and to be able to tweak them to your own needs. Purple and orange is a color combo that I personally use quite a bit, and in the course I explain why it works and why it's such a powerful combo for different types of moods and different types of scenarios, and how purple makes orange look stronger and orange makes purple look creepier. So lots and lots to learn in terms of color selection and which colors make each other stand out and how they change each other in various ways to begin with. For my frame, I'm using my Ultimate Blender pencil, which is the 20% French Gray Prismacolor. But anything that's lighter than the color of your paper will work perfectly well here as well. So there you have it, my graveyard fairy finally complete. About 25 minutes on the clock here, but 3+ hours on my real clock. That's how long this took, and I consider that to be pretty fast still. Now let's take a look at what we started with. This is the original drawing. This is the original light grayscale page that you will be getting in your graveyard fairy set, and this is printed on white paper. Can this effect be achieved on white paper? Absolutely. All the effects that I teach can be achieved on any color paper, but the approach will be a little bit different. One of the reasons this was as fast as it was, and like I said, 3 hours is pretty quick for something this elaborate with this amount of detail and shading. The reason that it was so fast is because we had the color of the paper working in our favor. If we were to do this on white paper, we would have to color everything that you're seeing as this mid-tone coffee color. We would have to do all of that by hand, stroke by stroke, either with brush markers or with colored pencils. And if you try to achieve the same exact effect as what you're seeing on the left side of the screen here on white paper, that may take up to 24, 72 hours. It could take weeks to achieve that effect, even for me, and I work extremely fast. So it's not necessarily wrong, and it certainly can be a lot of fun and very therapeutic, but I imagine that you guys purchased a lot of coloring pages this Halloween season, and you don't want to spend 2 weeks coloring a single page. So if you want to move through your coloring pages a little bit quicker, consider this technique. Consider working on darker paper, bringing in mixed media like brush markers or even acrylic paint. And of course, use white colored pencil or white charcoal to your advantage to create these really poppy effects like her wings. Notice that I left her wings nearly pure white for just this stunning effect. And they form a little heart-shaped kind of nicely, so that image just stands out. And speaking of millions of coloring pages that you've purchased this Halloween season, I hope that you've already been working in my latest published book, Demons, Ghosts, and Glamour. I'm going to put a link to that in the video description and the pinned comment below as well. Remember that the coupon code that you're seeing appear on the screen right now applies to everything in the Academy, including books and pages. So if you haven't gotten this book yet, remember to swing by the Academy and grab a copy. Or go to Amazon and get the physical copy of this book as well. So there you have it, boys and girls. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you picked up a lot of tricks. Remember that you can get the full recording of this on Patreon. It will be available in the month of November for all of my Coloring Club tier members. And after that, all of these recordings are available for individual purchase in the shop section of Patreon. So actually, if you go there right now, you will see all the previous recordings that you can purchase one time without joining as a Coloring Club member. Some people prefer to do that as well. Remember also to share your colorings in our community. We have an amazing, friendly, and very supportive community. Follow this link or the link in the video description to go to Discord. Join. It's free to join, very simple to use. Our admins will welcome you and guide you through the process. Simply share your work in our creations section and see what other people are posting as well. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I'm Lisa Mitrokhin. Happy coloring and happy Halloween.